Hi, my name is Benjamin Garcia, and I wrote a paper titled Narcissistic Communication in Global Media, Israel as an Example. And these words are a little bit convoluted, but I hope that by the end of my presentation, we will all be a little bit clearer on what is to be done. So let's start with why we should care. Narcissistic communication strategies are used to justify violence, control the media, and shape global opinion. I'll be focusing on Israel, but since I have created the term narcissistic communication strategies, I'm going to draw on some historical examples in order to create a framework to explain just what I mean by these words. So some familiar examples of countries with narcissistic communication styles are China and Russia. China's state media projects an image of total control. Surveillance, censorship, and internment camps are justified as necessary for security. Criticism is suppressed. Human rights abuses are denied. This is grandiose image control. A delusion that the state can be perfect, infallible, and beyond question. Russia uses a similar technique. Putin frames his nation as the heir to Soviet greatness. He presents Russia as a constant victim of Western aggression. Propaganda, censorship, and homophobia are deployed to shape national identity and to defend power. Criticism is treated as persecution. Aggression is justified as righteous revenge. These are classic examples of malignant defensiveness, a primitive defense mechanism, a state that cannot tolerate criticism, a state that responds to criticism with violence. Now we can turn to Israel. Look at the bombing of hospitals and refugee camps in Gaza. Look at the blockade that deprives Palestinians of food, water, and electricity. Human rights organizations have rightly called this ethnic cleansing. And yet the prevailing media narrative frames this violence as self-defense. It dehumanizes Palestinians. It presents disproportionate force as necessary. This is narcissistic communication. It is about an image. It is about power. It is about denying the humanity of the other. The United States is no stranger to this strategy. From slavery to the Trail of Tears, from internment camps to immigration policies today, the U.S. has used communication to erase oppression and to vindicate the oppressor. Anti-LGBTQIA legislation, suppression of student speech, immigration detention centers, all justified through narratives of safety, morality, and even progress. The message is consistent. Oppression is necessary. Violence is defense, and domination is order. And the global media often goes along. In 2024, nearly 70% of journalists killed worldwide were killed by Israeli forces. The United States provided nearly $18 billion in military aid that year. This is not just violence. This is violence funded and legitimatized through communication. Theory helps us understand this. The propaganda model shows how ownership and ideology filter information. The agenda-setting theory shows how media tells us what to think about, even if it cannot tell us just what to think. The spiral of silence shows how people with unpopular opinions often silence themselves for fear of isolation. Put together, these theories explain how oppressive states manufacture consent, how they create an epistemic bubble, how they condition the public to accept domination. The narrative paradigm reminds us that people understand reality mainly through stories. And so, stories become the perfect cover for systematic violence. The story is always the same. We are the victims. We are defending ourselves. We are morally burdened. But the reality is different. Occupation, mass incarceration, military aggression. The ethical principles are clear. Kant tells us that people must be treated as ends in and of themselves, never merely as a means. Hegel tells us that true ethical relations require mutual recognition. Fanon tells us that violence is only a course of action for those who are inherently weak. When states dehumanize civilians, when they suppress journalists, when they bomb refugee camps, they aren't acting ethically. They are acting to preserve power. They are acting to preserve image. This is malignant narcissism, grandiosity, aggression, the inability to tolerate criticism. And it is structural. It is not just about individual leaders. It is about systems. It is about regimes. So what is to be done? We need media literacy programs that teach people not just how to spot misinformation, but to understand how propaganda legitimizes oppression. We need international pressure to end funding relationships with governments that kill journalists or distort public discourse. We need academic institutions and independent press outlets to collaborate on truth-telling. We need whistleblowers and dissenters to be protected, not criminalized. And most of all, we need journalists to reclaim their role as fact-checkers, to reality test the narratives of power, to strip authoritarian systems of their most insidious weapon, legitimacy. Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, these are examples of whistleblowers who were criminalized, but their stories remind us that truth-telling is essential. Narcissistic communication erodes democracy. It justifies violence. It distorts our understanding of who deserves empathy and whose lives matter. Undoing this dynamic will require legal reform, institutional oversight, and a cultural shift toward ethical storytelling and mutual recognition. Everyone deserves empathy. All lives are equally valuable. And that is the message we must repeat. Repeat it until it breaks through the narcissistic noise. Repeat it until the global media landscape is transformed. Repeat it until communication liberates rather than dominates.